All right, where was I? Oh, yeah. My good friend for, oh, my God, since what, 2002, 2003, Tom Hartman. He and I worked for the same network back then, before I went to work for Air America, and Hartman syndicated his own show. And we worked for IE America Radio Network at the time, which was the network owned by the United Auto Workers. And then stupidly, they got rid of their network, which I don't understand, but that's what they did. But Hartman and I, and Peter Werby in Detroit, were the three mainstays on IE America Radio Network. And I found out from, chatting with Hartman that he had lived here in Atlanta. And oddly, he used to listen to me when I was on WSB here in Atlanta way back in the 40 years ago, back in the 80s. Was it that long ago? Oh, Jesus, God. Almost 40 years ago. And as I got to know Tom and his wife, saw them on several occasions in New York, in D.C., at various convocations of liberal talk show hosts. As I got to know Tom, I realized, Jesus, this guy, he's written 25 books. He still does I believe he still does a radio show, right? I'm pretty sure. I know he's on a free speech television, I think. But Hartman is going strong and always has ever since he decided to get into broadcast. And I have great respect for his understanding. He's a very smart man. He really is. His understanding of U.S. government and politics, and his, dare I say this, yes, I think I will. He is a Christian. He's a devout Christian. He's not a Christian terrorist, but he is a believer. And okay, bless his heart. But I've come to know Tom over the years as a man I have deep respect for. Louise, I'm sorry, I didn't mention his wife's name. So why do I mention this about Hartman? Well, a mutual listener of ours, a guy named Doc, who I believe lives in, I think, Wisconsin. Doc has been an ardent follower of Hartman's program, and he's been a follower of mine for years and years and years and years. Every once in a while, Doc will send me something that Hartman wrote, which is what he did yesterday, which is what I'm going to share with you now. And the reason I want to share it with you is because, like I said, Hartman's understanding of the way things work, not just politics, but business. He had I think a consulting firm or a PR firm here in Atlanta at one time. And if you listen to Hartman on the radio, you know what I'm talking about. He is a super talent and a very wise man. This is what he wrote, and I'm going to share it with you verbatim, as I sometimes do with pieces like this. Okay? It's under the heading, Yes, Donald Trump is the Antichrist. And the subhead is, of course, the next question is, what kind of Antichrist is he? A listener called into my program yesterday and asked, is Donald Trump the Antichrist? I passed on drawing a conclusion, but then the lines lit up with a steady stream of people over the next few hours offering their proofs that Trump was, in fact, the evil one come to ravage the earth. That first caller clearly hit a nerve. It's a fascinating question, however, whether put literally or metaphorically. Asking the question literally requires a belief in the actual reality of a Son of God Christ figure and of an Antichrist opponent of nearly equal but opposite power. This sort of thing fills the Bible, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, consider the question from the secular perspective, which argues these two terms represent, at their core, metaphors for the embodiment of good and evil. In this context, then, a more accurate question is Donald Trump an Antichrist? In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus spoke in the plural when he predicted, quote, false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravening wolves, end quote. After warning that grifters and con artists, in secular terms, would try to exploit his followers, he then said, quote, "By their fruits you shall know them," end quote. Trump's so-called fruits are pretty obvious. More than 20 women have accused him of rape and sexual assault. Hundreds of contractors, customers, and employees have accused him of stealing from them or refusing to pay them, or both, as have members of his own family. Throughout his presidency, he lied over 30,000 times. He pit Americans against each other by race, religion, and region in an effort to tear our country apart and thus weaken opposition to his authoritarian rule. He openly encouraged violence against unarmed people at multiple rallies and encouraged state violence at a speech to chiefs of police. He tried to overthrow and end our democracy. He embraced murderers, kleptocrats, and so-called strongman rulers while ridiculing Western democracies and their elected leaders. He tried to damage or dismantle political and military systems designed to keep peace in the world, including the UN, NATO, and the Iran nuclear agreement. He reaches out to Jesus' followers and then directs them toward bigotry, violence, and hatred. As an object of admiration and a role model, he's replaced Jesus in many white evangelical congregations. He delighted in tearing children from their parents and putting them in cages. He tried to end Americans' access to life-saving medical care by killing Obamacare and privatizing Medicare. He watched on television like a delighted child as his followers killed a police officer, sent 140 others to the hospital, and tried to murder the vice president and Speaker of the House. He lied about COVID, causing more disease and deaths in America than in any other nation in the world. This after disclosing the truth to Bob Woodward in February 2020. The main reason many Christians freak out about an antichrist is that following him will get you banned from heaven or even cast into hell. But what did Jesus, the guy Trump's white evangelical followers claim as their savior, what did Jesus say was necessary to get into heaven? Back in 1998, I had a private audience with Pope John Paul II at his invitation. A person close to him had read one of my books. Louise and I sat through an open-air concert with him and about 30 VIPs, including the leader of Germany's Bundestag, for more than an hour, surrounded by the splendor of Castel Gandolfo, the Pope's summer palace, on the rim of an extinct volcano overlooking Lake Albano. When we spoke privately after the concert, His Holiness's forceful comments reminded me of Jesus' words in Matthew 25. It's an amazing 2,000-year-old study that tells us everything we need to know about today's Christian politics. To wit, Jesus' disciples had gathered around him in a private and intimate setting. Finally, they thought they could ask him straight up the question that had been haunting them, particularly now that the Roman authorities were starting to talk about punishing or even executing them. How could they be sure to hang out with him in the afterlife? Jesus told them that at the end of days, he'd be sitting on his throne, separating the sheep from the goats, quote, as a shepherd divideth, end quote. The nation of sheep would go with him to heaven, the goats to hell. He said, quote, for I was a-hungered, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in, naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. End quote. At this point, his disciples, who had never, ever seen Jesus hungry, thirsty, homeless, sick, or naked, freaked out. Whoa, they shouted, we're screwed. They asked, panicked, when saw we thee hunger and fed thee, or thirsty and gave thee drink? When saw we thee a stranger and took thee in, or naked and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison and came unto thee? Jesus replied, reassuring them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me." End quote. This is the only place in the Bible where Jesus explicitly tells his disciples what acts they must perform in their entirety to get into heaven. Feed the hungry, care for the refugee, house and clothe the homeless, heal the sick, have compassion for those in prison. That's it. And it's a list that is quite literally the opposite of everything that Donald Trump advocates, stands for, and has done in his career. While biblical scholars are split about who the actual beast was that John referenced in his Revelation, many consider it to have been a politically necessary cloaking of the identity of the Roman Emperor Nero. It was clearly a political figure who represented the antithesis of the values and works Jesus laid out in the Sermon on the Mount and in Matthew 25. A leader whose actions unleashed, quote, "a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him, and power was given unto them over the fourth part of the earth to kill with sword and with hunger and with death and with the beasts of the earth." End quote. Caller after caller yesterday offered their own proofs of Trump being the beast or the Antichrist. One of them said, "MAGA means magic or sorcerer in Latin and multiple other languages." Another said his grandfather's name when he emigrated to America to start a whorehouse in the Pacific Northwest was Drumpf, which he changed to Trump. John in German is Johann. Therefore, his actual name is Donald Johann Drumpf, each name having 6 letters. Weirdly, the name is true also of Ronald Wilson Reagan. Let me digress from what Tom wrote. That is reference to the mark of the beast, 666. Back to Hartman's writings. Another caller said he armed the Saudis for their merciless bombing war against Yemen, which has 5 million people facing famine as the Saudi military blocks food arrivals. His family owns 666 Fifth Avenue. He fooled millions of evangelical followers of Jesus just as the beast was supposed to do. He put his own red hat MAGA mark on their foreheads. He consorts with whores and criminals. It was an interesting exercise in conversation, and I was surprised by how many people are actually religiously freaked out about Trump. But for me, all the proof I need that Trump, if not the biblical Antichrist, is at least a political one, is what he says and does. His fruits tell us all we need to know about who he really is. Tom Hartman. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcast. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.